Have you ever walked into a room for the first time and felt like you'd been there before? Met a stranger who felt like home, or a fear that lived in you before any trauma had a name? Moments like these hint at something deeper than déjà vu. They whisper of memory not stored in the brain, but in the soul. And that memory lives in the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are not just a metaphor. They are the energetic library of the universe, a vast, multi-dimensional field that records every thought, feeling, action, and intention of every soul across all lifetimes. Nothing is lost. Nothing is erased. Everything is held in a space of sacred remembrance, waiting for you to remember too. Imagine a cosmic archive, not made of pages or stone, but of frequency. Each soul a volume, each lifetime a chapter, each choice a sentence written in light. You are not a visitor to this library, you are its author. And it is open to you not through logic but through alignment. This concept is not new. Across time and cultures, echoes of the Akashic field appear again and again. In Christianity, the Book of Life. In Egyptian mysticism, the Hall of Ma'at. In Hinduism, the Akasha, the fifth element, the ether that holds all vibration. Even in quantum theory, whispers emerge of an informational field beneath form, a substrate that stores and transmits the codes of reality. What unites these visions is the belief that the universe remembers, that your soul is not wandering aimlessly, but unfolding according to a deeper intelligence that holds everything you've been and everything you're becoming. But this isn't about destiny, it's about awareness. The Akashic Records are not here to tell you what to do. They're here to help you see why you do what you do and how to shift it. They offer healing, not prediction. They provide insight, not control. Most of all, they reconnect you to the truth you already carry, that your pain has purpose, your patterns have origin, and your soul has direction. Accessing the records allows you to trace the roots of karmic cycles, unearth forgotten gifts, and awaken to the real reason you chose this life, this body, this moment. It's not about escaping reality. It's about transforming your relationship with it. So the question is not whether the records exist. The question is, are you ready to remember? There is a place where nothing is forgotten, not your quietest thought, not your deepest longing, not even the moment you turned away from your truth. In that place, there are no clocks, no calendars, no linear trails of time. And yet, everything you've ever done, said, or felt still lives there, still breathes, still echoes. This is the Akashic field. Unlike any archive you've imagined, it doesn't rest on shelves or drift in some faraway realm. It is not passive. It's alive. It's dynamic. It is, in essence, a field of living memory, coded not in letters but in energy. Every action you take, every decision you delay, every impulse you suppress sends out a signature frequency. And the field records it. Not to judge, not to punish, but to reflect. The Akashic field isn't watching you, it's remembering you. It holds the vibrational imprint of your soul's choices across all incarnations, across all dimensions. It doesn't just record outcomes, it captures intention. Why you did, what you feared, what you hoped, what you truly longed to become but didn't yet dare. Most people don't know they're connected to it. They move through life as if each moment were isolated, disposable. But every breath we take is stored in this sacred continuum. The records are not something you open like a book. You enter them. You feel your way into them. And more often than not, they find you when your being becomes still enough to listen. It's through meditation that many first touch the edges of this field. When the mind quiets, the noise falls away, and what remains is essence. It may come as a memory that wasn't yours, a vision of a moment that never happened in this life, but feels more real than anything you've lived. Others find access through prayer, ritual, even silence. Some through states of expanded consciousness, near death, shamanic journeys, or spontaneous awakenings that shatter the veil. The field does not require you to believe in it. It only requires your presence. And when you arrive in that presence fully, humbly, you begin to feel something strange, familiar, a warmth that isn't emotional but energetic, a recognition that isn't intellectual but cellular. You begin to sense that your story is not yours alone, that it is written into the field of all stories, that you are part of a larger memory dreaming itself awake. This is not fiction. It is not philosophy. It is a truth that mystics, visionaries, and seekers have whispered through the ages. They've called it by many names: the Akasha, the Book of Life, the Ether. But its essence is always the same, a living intelligence woven into the universe that never forgets who you are. And more importantly, never stops inviting you to remember. There is a place where all separation ends, not in theory but in experience. A place where your thoughts are not just yours, and your voice echoes not into silence but into a field that is already listening. That field is the Akashic. And it is not just memory, it is mind. Not a human mind, but a divine one. We speak of consciousness as if it's a personal thing, a spark flickering in the skull. But true consciousness, the one you touch when you step beyond the veil, is not confined to you. It is through you, around you, inside everything. The Akashic field is where your small awareness begins to remember its connection to a vast, intelligent web, a matrix of knowing that does not need words to understand. This field does not store facts, it holds frequency. It does not communicate in logic but in resonance. It sends no commands, only mirrors. And when you are quiet enough to feel it, the knowing arrives not like a thought but like a return. You don't learn anything. You remember what your soul already knew before you were born. For some, that remembering comes in visions, flashes of ancient places, forgotten faces, symbols that vibrate more than they explain. For others, it is sound, tones, names, fragments of languages never spoken aloud. And for many, it is simply knowing, a clarity that comes without question because it arrives without doubt. That knowing is sacred. It is the voice of universal consciousness, and it has waited eons for your silence. To step into the Akashic is not to escape this world, but to see it more clearly. To feel the intelligence behind every encounter, every delay, every seeming accident. You realize nothing is random. Everything is part of a pattern, one that your soul co-wrote with the universe long before your mind could name it. This is where the Akashic becomes more than archive. It becomes intimacy. It becomes intimacy with Source itself, Not the idea of God, but the breath of it. Not a deity to be worshipped, but a consciousness to be remembered. Divine intelligence is not outside you. It is the very essence that animates you. When you access the records, you are not retrieving a file. You are returning to that essence. And the paradox is this: the more you surrender your personal identity, the more the records reveal your deepest self, the one beneath the rolls, the one before the wound, the one who remembers what it means to be whole. This is why the Akashic is sacred, not because it holds answers, but because it holds you. The soul does not heal through information. It heals through remembrance, through the sacred recognition of patterns that were once invisible, now illuminated. This is the quiet, powerful work of the Akashic Records, to reveal the deeper architecture of your life, not as fate, but as design. Not to predict your future, but to align you with it. When you enter the records, you are not entering a file folder of facts. You are stepping into a space of sacred neutrality, a space where nothing is judged and everything is understood. You begin to see the threads, the repeating loops. The ache you thought was just your own sadness suddenly echoes with the grief of lifetimes. The fear you carry, it didn't start with you. It may not even belong to this life, but it lives in you now, and so it must be met. This is karma, not punishment, but momentum. Karma is not what you deserve. It's what remains unresolved. It's what continues to echo until it's heard, held, integrated. And the Akashic field doesn't just point to these echoes. It helps you feel them with a clarity that softens the edges of pain. That allows you to hold even your most broken parts with reverence, not shame. In this field, healing doesn't mean fixing what's wrong. It means remembering what is true, that your soul is not wounded, it is layered. That beneath every survival pattern is a sacred purpose. That every cycle can be rewritten once it is seen clearly. The records don't just show you your story, they show you the meaning behind it. And in that meaning, there is medicine. People come to the records asking, "What's my purpose?" But often, purpose isn't a career or calling, it's a restoration. It's remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's reclaiming the clarity you buried under obligation, trauma, and doubt. And from that space of truth, your future begins to rearrange itself. Not because fate shifts, but because you do. The Akashic doesn't hand you a map. It hands you a mirror. And as you look into that mirror, you see both the question and the answer living within you. The field doesn't tell you where to go. It reveals who you already are and who you're becoming if you choose to walk awake. Healing through the records is not a moment, it's a movement, a slow, sacred unraveling of the lies that once kept you safe, but no longer serve you. A return to alignment, not perfection. A remembrance of wholeness that was never truly lost. Your soul does not want you to be good. It wants you to be free. And in the Akashic field, long before science tried to dissect reality into particles and forces, ancient sages whispered of a fifth element. Beyond earth, water, fire, and air, there was Akasha, the subtle ether, the invisible thread, the vast, vibrating field that holds everything and yet cannot be held. It is not just space, it is sacred space, the womb of all becoming. Akasha is not a concept, it is a presence, a silence that speaks. a spaciousness in which all energy dances. The Sanskrit word itself means ether or sky, but what it points to is deeper than air, wider than cosmos. Akasha is the foundation beneath foundations. It is not what you see, it is the space in which seeing happens. Not the thought, but the field in which thought arises. It is the mother of vibration, the breath behind sound, the stillness beneath movement. Every note of music, every pulse of light, every spark of life emerges from Akasha and returns to it. This is not metaphor. This is the physics of spirit. The Akashic field, the living memory space of soul and cosmos, rests within Akasha. Imagine it as a vast, still lake. Every moment, every action, every emotion sends a ripple across its surface. Some ripples are gentle, others crash like storms, but none disappear. They spread, merge, echo. The lake remembers. But here's the truth. You are not just standing by the lake. You are made of its waters. Every cell in your body hums with the echoes of Akasha. You don't access it like a library. You tune to it like a frequency. And that tuning requires more than technique. It requires stillness, devotion, a willingness to feel what most of the world ignores, the subtle. Akasha is the home of the subtle, the in-between, the energy you feel in a sacred place, the knowing you can't explain, the tears that come with no story. It's the texture of presence itself. To sense Akasha is to remember that emptiness is not void. It is fullness too vast to be filled. In the chaos of modern life, where noise is worshipped and silence feared, Akasha is the sacred pause, the space where wisdom can land, the breath between thoughts, the place where you can finally hear the quiet guidance that's always been there, waiting. Every mystic has touched Akasha. Every healer has channeled its currents. Every artist who creates from the unseen is pulling from this field. It is not reserved for the gifted. It is native to your being. You were born from it. You will return to it. And in between, your every choice, your every heartbeat is rippling through it, writing your story into the subtle fabric of all that is. This is Akasha. Not a thing to grasp, but a truth to surrender into. Not an object, but an origin. And perhaps in moments of true stillness, you'll remember, you've always belonged to the fifth element. Long before the term Akashic Records entered spiritual vocabulary, civilizations across time were already reaching for it, naming it in their own sacred language, glimpsing it in rituals, scriptures, and symbols that outlived even their empires. Though divided by geography, culture, and doctrine, they spoke of the same phenomenon: a divine memory, a cosmic ledger, a sacred archive that holds the unfolding story of every soul. In Christianity, there is the Book of Life, a scroll said to record every deed, every word, every name destined for redemption. It is not just judgment, but remembrance, a holy record of being. One does not earn entry. One awakens to it. The book is written not just by God's hand, but by our own, through choices rooted in love or fear. In ancient Egypt, the Hall of Mot awaited every soul after death. There, one's heart was weighed against a feather, a test not of morality, but of energetic purity. The deeds of a lifetime were not erased nor forgotten. They were measured in vibration. In that moment of reckoning, truth was not external, it was felt. The soul knew what it had written. Hinduism speaks of the Akasha as the subtle ether, the first element, the container of all others. It is said that Brahma, the creator, keeps a record of every soul's karma in the Chitragupta, an energetic accounting that determines rebirth and evolution. In this view, no thought is wasted, no intention is lost. All is accounted for, not with punishment, but with possibility. Buddhism doesn't name the records, but its teachings echo the same truth. The concept of karmic imprints, known as vasanas or subtle impressions, suggests that all actions leave a trace. These traces travel across lifetimes, shaping tendencies, attracting experiences. Liberation comes not by forgetting the past, but by seeing it clearly and choosing differently. In the mystical branches of Judaism, particularly Kabbalah, the heavenly tablets are said to record the soul's journey, inscribed in the upper worlds by angelic scribes. Every mitzvah, every omission, every unspoken yearning is written, not as reward or reprimand, but as resonance. Each soul contributes to the divine story, and the story remembers. These traditions do not contradict, they converge. They remind us that the idea of a living spiritual record is not fringe, it is foundational. Whether called a book, a hall, a field, or a scroll, they all point to the same knowing. Our lives are not isolated flashes in the dark. They are part of a greater continuity, witnessed and held by the fabric of the cosmos. The Akashic Records, then, are not a modern invention. They are a rediscovery, a remembrance of what the ancients knew, that the soul's journey matters, that every breath is written, and that somewhere beyond time and form, the truth of who you are is being held in a sacred memory that cannot be erased. Perhaps that's why, across all spiritual paths, we keep circling the same truth. Nothing is ever truly lost, only recorded, waiting to be read when the soul is ready. What if the Akashic Records aren't just metaphysical poetry, but part of an unfolding scientific frontier? Over recent decades, thinkers like Ervin Laszlo have named what many mystics intuited for centuries, the Akashic Field, suggesting it's a real phenomenon, a universal information field woven into the quantum fabric of reality. Laszlo's insight casts the Akashic not as myth, but as a quantum informational field, one that exists beyond space, beyond time, a tapestry where energy flows without loss, where information is conserved as surely as physical matter. Modern physics already whispers of this. The theories of non-locality, zero-point fields, and the holographic universe suggest that we may live in a cosmos that is fundamentally interactive, intelligent, and deeply interwoven. Imagine the universe as a hologram, every fragment holding the entire map, every movement contained in every particle. Energy and information are not separate, they dance together. In this view, the Akashic Field becomes not a spiritual metaphor, but an energetic infrastructure, an unseen matrix that preserves the memory of creation, not only in the macrocosm, but within you. When quantum mechanics speaks of entanglement, it tells us that tiny particles affect each other across vast distances, instantaneously. When cosmology reveals a universe filled with fluctuating vacuum energy, It hints at a substrate where possibility lives before manifestation. These are not just theories. They are portals into understanding how memory might exist as fields, not files, where everything you are, everything you've ever done, is encoded in the architecture of existence itself. This is the bridge between lab instruments and soul whispers, between physicists in labs and mystics in meditation. Science shows us that reality is at once messy and ordered, observable and unseen, quantum and conscious. The Akashic field is the crossroads of that paradox, where energy, intention, and information coalesce. In your quietest moments, when thoughts settle and presence remains, something shifts. Your body becomes a sensor, attuned to what the instruments can't yet measure. You begin to sense coherence. You feel resonance, a memory not yours, but yours to claim. This is the laboratory of inner science, the nexus where heart and mind begin to align. Many who explore the records report that the information they receive feels more real than real, because it vibrates, not just informs. It isn't abstract, it's functional. It emerges through intention, through energetic tuning, through prayer or meditation. And when you shift yourself, the field shifts too. Your nervous system calibrates, your senses widen, your story deepens. Acknowledging this connection does not weaken science, it deepens it. It invites researchers to explore consciousness not as epiphenomenon, but as a fundamental ingredient of reality. And for seekers, it offers faith that what they experience in stillness is part of a larger tapestry, one that is increasingly being recognized by modern physics. The story of Akashic is no longer confined to the margins. It is finding its place in universities, conferences, journals. And yet, beyond academic validation, it calls to something inside you, a recognition that the world is alive with meaning and memory. So when you access the records, you're not stepping into fantasy. You're entering a field of energetic memory, one grounded in cutting-edge physics, tethered to ancient wisdom and responsive to your consciousness. This is no bridge to cross. It is the bridge you are. If you'd like me to adapt or expand this section further, or provide citations from science sources, just let me know. The Akashic field does not respond to command. It responds to coherence. You don't force your way into it, you align. You remember. You open, not with will, but with wonder. And that opening begins with intention. Before tools, before rituals, before words, there is energy, your energy. The records are not impressed by credentials, titles, or technique. They are moved by purity of intent, clarity of heart, the willingness to approach not as a seeker of secrets, but as a servant of truth. This is the real doorway. Still, there are tools, gateways for tuning. And for many, that begins with silence. Meditation is the most universal portal. When the surface noise of the mind settles, the deeper frequencies begin to rise. You don't need to travel anywhere. You become the space. In that space, symbols emerge, memories flicker. A knowing arises not from logic but from presence. Prayer is another bridge, not as petition, but as positioning. The pathway prayer process is one such method, created by Linda Howe, that offers a structure to enter the records through reverent invocation. Each word in this prayer is not a spell, but a tone. Each phrase holds a vibrational key. When spoken with sincerity, it tunes your field to the resonance of the Akashic. Breathwork is equally powerful. Every breath is a frequency reset. Deep, rhythmic breathing moves energy, opens channels, and softens resistance. In certain patterns, the breath becomes a bridge, not just to altered states, but to deeper remembering. Sound, especially vibration-based tools like crystal bowls, tuning forks, or even sacred chants, can dissolve mental noise and amplify intuitive reception. Sound bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the soul's ear. Many describe a soft tone or hum guiding them into the records, not imagined but felt. But technique alone is never enough. You can say the right words, follow the right steps, sit for the right amount of time, and still remain closed. Because the key isn't the tool, it's the traveler. The one who enters must be willing to be changed. The one who listens must surrender the need to control what is heard. This is why gratitude is essential. Gratitude dissolves ego. It prepares the field. It tells the records, I am not here to take, I am here to receive with humility. That energetic signature changes everything. The records open not to curiosity, but to reverence. What you find inside is not always what you want, but it is what your soul needs. Sometimes you'll receive visions. Other times only a word, a color, a sensation. Often it will be subtle. Always it will be sacred. And over time, with practice, a rhythm emerges. You'll feel the shift before it arrives. You'll sense the presence, the way the room softens, the way your heart begins to listen. And you'll know you are not alone in here. You never were. The Akashic Records are not a place you go. They are a frequency you become. The Akashic Records are not tools. They are temples. To enter them is not to browse through someone's secrets. It is to step into sacred space, where every vibration carries memory, every memory holds meaning, and every interaction is a prayer. Accessing the records is not a right. It is a responsibility, one that begins not with technique but with intention. The records respond to energy more than words, and they open only to those who approach with reverence. Not curiosity, not control, not spiritual voyeurism, but genuine service to truth. You may be able to access another soul's field, but that doesn't mean you should. The principle of permission is foundational. You are never entitled to another soul's story, no matter how gifted you are. Their journey, their past, their karmic patterns are theirs to explore, only to be revealed when they consciously ask, and when their soul is ready. Consent is not a formality. It is a spiritual contract. Even then, the records are not a place to satisfy questions of the mind. They are a space for healing the soul, and healing cannot happen in a field of manipulation. That's why the records remain silent when accessed with hidden motives. They withhold clarity from those who seek to prove something, expose someone, or validate an agenda. The frequency simply doesn't match. Instead, the records respond to purity, to humility, compassion, and alignment. When you enter them on behalf of another, your role is not interpreter. It is witness. Your task is not to explain or analyze, but to hold presence, to reflect what arises with neutrality and love. The ethical posture is clear. Do no harm. But in the Akashic space, it goes further. Do with honor. Every inquiry, every invocation is a dialogue with the divine intelligence that holds us all. It is not casual. It is not transactional. It is sacred. That sacredness extends to how you integrate what you receive. If you are shown something painful, respect it. If you are offered insight, ground it. Don't sensationalize. Don't perform. Let the records work on you before you work through them. This is not content for entertainment. It is medicine for transformation. Even in self-access, there is responsibility. Ask, why am I entering? Is my heart clear? Am I seeking truth or validation? Am I willing to be changed by what I find? The more honest your answers, the more deeply the records respond. Over time, you'll notice the difference between reading the records and being read by them. The latter is where true service begins, because in that space, you are not the one looking, you are the one being seen. And that seeing is not casual, it is cosmic. To be witnessed by the Akashic field is to stand naked before love itself. It changes you. So treat each visit as a ceremony. Approach like a pilgrim, not a tourist. Listen like a priest, not a performer. And remember, this is not a practice of power. It is a practice of presence. And presence, held with integrity, becomes revelation. The Akashic Records do not speak in the language of books. They do not offer paragraphs or sentences. They offer something older, something purer, a transmission that bypasses the mind and moves straight into the field of the soul. When you enter the Akashic space, what you receive may not make sense at first. It may not come in words. Often it doesn't. Instead, the records speak in symbols, in visions, in vibrations so subtle they feel more like a shift than a sound. The message isn't heard, it's felt. A doorway in your heart opens, and suddenly there's a scene, a memory, a color that speaks, a phrase that doesn't come from your voice but lands inside like it's always been there. And the strangest thing happens, you know, without explanation, without doubt. You just know. This phenomenon is called direct knowing or claircognizance. It's one of the most common ways people receive information from the Akashic field. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It lands like a whisper you've waited lifetimes to remember. And in that instant, the world rearranges, not because anything outside changed, but because you did. Some will see images, landscapes from other times, symbols that shimmer, beings of light. Others hear tones or names, echoes that vibrate through their chest. Still others feel physical sensations, warmth, tingling, a pull toward a direction. A pause that signals presence. There's no right way. The field meets you where you are, in the language your soul most understands. And yet, regardless of the form, one quality is always present: love. Every message from the records is wrapped in compassion. Even the hard truths, especially those, there is no judgment here, only perspective. Only an invitation to remember who you are beyond fear, beyond failure, beyond story. It's why the records don't shame. They don't criticize, they reveal. Gently, precisely. And they wait. Because they know that your healing is not measured in how fast you learn, but in how fully you receive. Sometimes the records will offer guidance through archetype. A journey you recognize in myth, a pattern you've seen repeated in history or dreams. Other times, it's a single image, a bridge, a flame, an open door. These aren't decorations, they're keys. Your task is not to decode them, but to sit with them. Let them unfold in your awareness over time. The more you listen, the clearer they become. The more you trust, the more they expand. The Akashic field is not a voice shouting from above. It's a river flowing through you. To hear it clearly, you don't need to get louder. You need to get quieter. Let go of needing answers in linear form. Let go of needing to understand. Let yourself feel what's being offered. Let yourself remember what your soul has always known. Because the field is not here to give you information. It's here to give you back to yourself. Some wounds are too deep to trace back to this life. Some fears arrive too early, too sharp, too specific, before you ever had a reason to feel them. You meet someone for the first time and feel ancient grief. You step into a place and are overcome with awe or dread. Where does that come from? The Akashic Records offer a quiet, powerful answer. It didn't begin here. In the Akashic field, past lives are not fantasy. They are frequency. They are imprints stored not in your mind, but in your soul's energetic memory. These aren't stories for curiosity. They are keys. And when retrieved with reverence, they unlock the roots of the very patterns you've tried to heal in this lifetime. Your anxiety, your avoidance, the relationships that repeat the same cycles, the dreams that won't let go. These are not random, they are karmic echoes. Karmic not in the sense of punishment, but of momentum. They are energies that have not yet been fully seen, understood, and released. When the records reveal a past life, it is not to indulge nostalgia. It is not to dramatize or escape. It is to heal, to show you how the thread began, to offer clarity for why you react, resist, or repeat certain behaviors. And when that moment of recognition comes, when the puzzle piece clicks into place, you do not simply learn something, you liberate it. You are no longer bound by a story you didn't know you were carrying. Sometimes, you will be shown lives filled with sorrow, loss, betrayal, abandonment. Other times you will see gifts, healer, teacher, warrior, artist. These too are part of your soul's inheritance. But even the gifts can become burdens if they remain hidden or misused. The records offer a chance not just to remember who you were, but to integrate it, to choose consciously whether to continue or to release. This is the sacred work of karmic awareness. It is not easy. It asks you to look at your shadows, not with shame, but with curiosity. It invites you to ask, what patterns am I repeating? What beliefs am I carrying that don't belong to this moment? What would it feel like to live without them? The answers often arrive not in flashes, but in slow unfolding. A shift in dreams, a sudden forgiveness, a clearer boundary, a deeper breath. And you realize the past is not here to haunt you. It is here to help you remember what you came to transform. In spiritual growth, awareness is the first step. But remembrance is the turning point. You don't evolve by denying your past. You evolve by facing it, healing it, and reclaiming your power from it. The Akashic Records don't just give you stories. They give you permission to let go, to rewrite, to choose again. Because your soul is not just a witness to history. It is a living force of liberation. You've met them, The ones who stir something ancient in you, the instant bond, the inexplicable tension, the love that feels too deep, too fast, or the person who triggers your greatest growth through your deepest pain. These are not coincidences. These are soul contracts, agreements made before this life, remembered only in its unfolding. In the Akashic field, every connection is energetic first, physical second. We don't just meet people by chance. We re-meet them, across lifetimes in different bodies, wearing different masks, but carrying the same frequency. Souls that travel together tend to return together because the story is not finished. Sometimes the bond is sweet, mutual healing, shared mission, unconditional support. Other times it is intense, even painful. But pain does not mean punishment. It often signals a karmic agreement, a chance to face what was once left undone, a chance to speak what was once silenced, a chance to choose love where once there was fear. The records reveal these soul relationships not to romanticize them, but to help you recognize them for what they are and what they're here to teach. That parent you struggle with, the friend who disappeared, the lover who shattered you, each may be a soul playing a role you both agreed to long before this life began. Not to harm you, to wake you. And in that recognition, healing begins. Because once you understand the sacred purpose behind a relationship, forgiveness becomes natural. Compassion replaces confusion. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start wondering, "What are we completing together?" The narrative shifts from victimhood to soul work, from conflict to closure. Soul contracts are not eternal obligations. They are invitations, and you always have free will. The record may show you the bond, but only you can choose how to respond to it. Sometimes the most loving act is to stay and grow. Other times it's to release and bless the path. Either way, awareness is the alchemy. The beauty of recognizing these patterns is that they turn pain into portal. What once felt like personal suffering is revealed as collective healing. Every relationship becomes a mirror, and through those mirrors, we polish the soul. You'll begin to notice certain people activate something in you, a lesson, a longing, a memory. And in that activation, your own evolution is triggered. You'll start to feel less alone, more connected, and even in heartbreak, you'll sense the holy. This is the quiet grace of soul relationships. Not that they last forever, but that they carry us further along the path to wholeness. And every time you choose love instead of fear within those bonds, a contract is fulfilled, a cycle is completed, and your soul breathes a little lighter. Buried beneath the noise of modern life lies a memory your soul has never forgotten. Not a moment, but a mastery, a skill, a sacred knowing. You were born with it, not because you learned it, but because you lived it. Somewhere in your energetic archive, you've sung these songs before, spoken these truths, healed with these hands. This is the grace of the Akashic Records. They don't just remind you who you were, they reawaken what still lives in you. Across lifetimes, you've gathered tools, gifts of wisdom, creativity, intuition, leadership. Some were celebrated, others silenced, but none are lost. They rest like seeds in the soil of your soul, waiting for the right conditions to rise again. And the records, they are the sun. When you access the Akashic field with sincere intent, forgotten talents begin to surface, not through performance but through remembrance. You may feel drawn to a language you've never studied, or a craft your body understands before your mind can explain. You might dream of symbols that carry meaning without translation. These aren't random, they're invitations. Often, your current purpose is woven from these past life threads. The artist who feels stifled today may once have painted visions in temples. The speaker afraid to share truth may have been silenced as a mystic. The teacher, the healer, the leader, you've been them. You are them. But remembering that truth requires courage. Because reclaiming your gifts means taking responsibility for them. It's not enough to know you were a healer. You must live the energy of healing now, with integrity, with presence, with humility. The records won't hand you a script. They'll open a doorway. And walking through it means becoming what you've always been, but with awakened awareness. This isn't just about career or calling. It's about alignment. When you live in sync with your soul's original genius, life begins to move differently. Synchronicities multiply. Confidence grows, not from ego, but from recognition. You're no longer trying to become something. You're remembering what you are. And as you express these gifts, you become a mirror for others. Your courage awakens their memory. Your clarity becomes a frequency that calls other sleeping talents to rise. This is how the soul evolves, not by gathering more, but by uncovering what was never truly lost. So if you feel the pull towards something ancient, an ability, a longing, a way of being that doesn't quite fit the logic of this life, pause. Listen, feel. That may not be fantasy. That may be your soul knocking. The question is no longer, what am I good at? But what has my soul always known? And the answer is already alive inside you. The Akashic Records are not abstract philosophy. They are not reserved for mystics in robes or seekers in silence. They are living tools of transformation, reaching across the veil into the very heart of everyday life. And their power is best understood not through theory, but through story. There was a woman who had carried chronic illness for over a decade. Doctors offered labels, pills, prognoses, but no true healing. In the records, she was shown an image of herself in a previous life, abandoned in a forest, freezing, silenced. That pain had calcified into her body, and with the recognition came release. She wept not just from memory, but from freedom. Weeks later, symptoms began to ease. Her body remembered what her mind had long suppressed. She was safe now. Another man, grieving the suicide of his partner, entered the records with nothing but pain. What he received wasn't an answer, but a vision, a shared soul contract, a lesson in choosing self-worth across timelines. He saw that their connection wasn't broken, it had simply shifted dimensions. That knowing softened the ache. He began to live again, not in denial of loss, but in deeper communion with love. A young artist, always afraid to be seen, accessed the records and was shown a life as a temple scribe, killed for recording sacred truths. The fear made sense, but now in this life there was no danger. The recognition was a doorway. She began creating again. Her work carried a depth she couldn't explain, but others felt it. That was the gift. Remembered purpose turned into expression. These are not anomalies. They are echoes of what the records offer every soul willing to ask with an open heart. Because the Akashic field doesn't just show you what was, it activates what can be. The process is subtle, yet seismic. You may not see visions or hear voices. You may just notice that the weight you've carried is suddenly lighter, that the choice you couldn't make now feels inevitable, that the fear no longer runs the show. People leave the records with insights that change careers, heal relationships, reconcile childhood wounds, and ignite gifts that had long gone dormant. The field doesn't solve your problems. It shifts your perception, and in doing so, invites new outcomes. And what all these stories share is this: the records reflect your truth back to you with so much compassion that healing becomes inevitable, not forced, not pushed, simply remembered. It's not magic, it's memory. It's not fortune-telling, it's frequency alignment. And it's not reserved for the few. It's accessible to the many, anyone willing to meet their soul with honesty, reverence, and readiness to grow. These real awakenings are reminders. The Akashic Records are not a place you visit once. They are a relationship. And with each return, your life becomes less about survival and more about remembrance. What was once whispered in temples is now being spoken in boardrooms. What once required robes and rituals is now being explored through coaching, education, and leadership. The Akashic Records, long held as a sacred mystery, are no longer just for mystics. They are becoming a living map for a world in transition. Across the globe, healers are integrating the records into trauma recovery, helping clients move beyond inherited wounds with grace and speed. Coaches are using them to identify soul-aligned purpose, unlocking gifts that personality tests could never detect. Educators are drawing on the records to reimagine learning, not as memorization, but as soul activation. Even forward-thinking leaders are using the Akashic perspective to create conscious systems, where intuition informs innovation, and purpose replaces profit as the North Star. This shift is not about mainstreaming spirituality. It's about returning to a deeper intelligence, one that has always been part of the human experience. The Akashic field is no longer cloaked in mysticism. It is being translated, tested, and trusted as an energetic GPS, a guide through complexity, uncertainty, and unprecedented change. In an age of information overload, the soul longs for orientation. In a world fractured by speed and division, we are yearning for coherence. And the records offer that, not as dogma but as direct experience. Not to replace reason, but to restore balance between logic and intuition, science and spirit, action and alignment. What we're witnessing is more than personal healing. It is a collective awakening, one soul at a time, remembering its place in a larger pattern. And when enough individuals wake up to their truth, a new world begins to emerge, not imposed from above, but grown from within. This is how paradigm shifts happen, not through slogans, but through frequency. Through people who walk differently, choose differently, lead differently, because they are living in tune with something deeper than ego, louder than fear, stronger than the noise of culture. The Akashic Records are no longer a hidden chamber. They are a global resource, a bridge between ancient knowing and future vision. a compass for the soul in times when maps fail. And the more we trust their guidance, the more we create a world not just of progress, but of presence. Because the real revolution isn't outer, it's inner. The next era will not be built by strategy alone, but by energy. Not by systems of control, but by networks of coherence. And it starts with this: a single person tuning in, listening, remembering, and choosing to live from the wisdom they find there. You are not a footnote in someone else's narrative. You are not a fragment drifting through time, waiting for meaning. You are a living line in the great manuscript of the cosmos, written in light, remembered by eternity, and forever inscribed in the Akashic Records. Every breath you take echoes into the field. Every choice, every hesitation, every breakthrough becomes part of a sacred archive that never forgets. And not as judgment, but as witnessing. The records do not measure your worth. They honor your becoming. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be present, because the story of your soul is not built from success. It is built from truth. The moment you speak what was once unspoken, feel what was once numb, forgive what once felt unforgivable, you are writing a new chapter. One that didn't exist until you had the courage to become it. And here is the deeper truth. You chose this life. Before form, before breath, you said yes. Not to ease, but to evolution. Not to comfort, but to clarity. You came here to remember what the world taught you to forget. That your soul is not a question. It is an answer. The Akashic Records are not far away. They are closer than your next thought. And every moment of awareness, every act of alignment pulls your story further into coherence. When you speak from the soul, the records vibrate. When you live with intention, the records respond. When you love truly, vulnerably, without condition, they expand. This isn't a philosophy, it's a practice. To live awake is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. Not because someone is watching, but because your future self is listening. The version of you who will look back from lifetimes ahead is watching what you're choosing now. And from that future vantage point, every step of healing becomes a gift. Every truth told becomes a torch. Every moment of presence becomes a legacy. So how will you write the next line? Not with certainty, but with courage. Not by erasing the past, but by reweaving it with meaning. Not by chasing perfection, but by showing up again and again in the vibration of truth. Because this is what it means to live aligned, to let the soul lead. To stop performing a life that fits and start creating a life that resonates. Your records are not just behind you, they are unfolding through you. So breathe, listen, let the wisdom rise from within, and write the next chapter with the ink of awareness, the clarity of love, and the light of who you truly are. You are remembered, you are essential, and your story is already written in the stars.